Call this meeting to order. Would you please arise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance with us? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for coming out tonight. First item on our business is our weekly commission reports. Commissioner Moore.
The only thing is the economic development webinar on Wednesday, which I may attend.
All right. Mr. Olson.
I have no meetings scheduled this week, but I would like to make a little comment on the AWC conference that we attended last week, and what I took away from it as the most important thing to me was that pertains to the city, and as we talk about grant funding and loans and infrastructure work, is that I think we're on our own. That it doesn't appear that we're going to get much help from the state in the future from grants and even low-interest loans like through the Public Works Trust Fund, that it's going to have some bearing on how we look at this water project coming up, that we're going to get the best deal that we're going to get for some years, I believe, that we're going to have to borrow money on the open market rather than depend on the state. So it was a little disconcerting, but I think it was the reality of what's coming. So just wanted to make note of that. That's my report.
All right. Tomorrow morning I will be attending a left board meeting, and then I may come on Wednesday to an economic development webinar. I don't know what a webinar is, but I'm sure after going I will know what it is. So that may be something that I will attend, and that completes our commission weekly reports. I will just say that I also attended, and Commissioner Moore also, the AWC Association of Washington Cities, kind of a lobby. It's kind of an event where you kind of lobby for your causes and whatnot over in the Capitol, and that it's an opportunity also to network with other cities across the state with like-minded interests on how they are dealing with some of the challenges that small cities and medium-sized cities face. And so you band together and you form coalitions so that you can address the problems and maybe have a little more clout and power over there in the Capitol. So it was a good event, and so we are continuing to move forward in that area. So that ends our commission reports. And the next opportunity is a general public comment period. We have two of them throughout the evening. This is the first opportunity, and so if somebody has signed in, it would appear somebody has. This is an opportunity to talk to us. Okay, it's Pat. I'll just say, Pat, did you want to speak a little later? Okay, no problem. I've got the list right here. So, all right. Have my fellow commissioners had a chance to review their consent agenda material? And if they have, could we please have a reading of the consent agenda?
Consent agenda. Vouchers numbered 82709 through 82763 in the amount of $49,248.34. Retreat of January 9th, 2014. Study session of January 13th, 2014. And business meeting of January 21st, 2014.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
I second that.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The agenda passes. There's no old business at this time, but we have, I believe, 3 items under new business. And the first of those is going to be presented to us by our Municipal Court Administrator, Shelby Conklin. And Conklin, there you go, I got it right. And so if you want to come up and talk to us about a jail issue.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. As you know from the briefing, I'm here tonight to recommend termination of the interlocal agreement between the cities of Shelton and Wapato for jail services. The agreement has been effective for just about 10 years and was to address our issues with overcrowding in the Mason County Jail. The agreement allowed the city to house inmates serving longer sentences in the Wapato City Jail. The Wapato daily rate was $35 a day, which was also a reduction in cost compared with Mason County. Since then, the cost has increased to $50 a day, and since 2011, the City of Shelton is required to guarantee one person in custody per day for 365 days a year. That's not been a problem in as much as we regularly have more than one person in custody in Wapato. Over time, however, we began experiencing difficulty getting more than just one person in custody in Wapato because they had more than one jurisdiction contracting for jail services. We began having difficulty getting them to respond to our request to pick up additional inmates. So we entered into an interlocal agreement with the City of Forks for additional jail services. The cost per day in Forks is $45 plus a nominal transportation fee. We did, however, until recently, have one inmate housed per day in Wapato. In January, Wapato inadvertently released one inmate about 15 days early. Per the agreement, they're to provide transportation back to Shelton, which had been done by bus. In this case, however, they provided transportation to SeaTac, but not to Shelton. So given the required guarantee of one bed per day, the distance and transportation issue, and the alternative of the Forks Jail facility, it's our recommendation that the Commission authorize the mayor to sign the notice of intent to terminate the interlocal agreement between the cities of Shelton and Wapato, and notice be sent to Wapato pursuant to Section 14 of the agreement.
Any questions or comments?
It seems like a fairly straightforward no-brainer, and I appreciate your looking after our dollars doing this, so I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, so you're not anticipating a problem, I mean, we don't have to have that particular facility for our prisoners? I mean, you're not going to now find that, we're sure.
No, we've only had one person in there for well over a year, and that we are able almost always to get somebody immediately into Forks, and if not, we set it down the road just a little ways, and then they report and go do their jail time when the facility has room. So jail space is always at a premium, but given the distance to Wapato and the transportation and having to guarantee them that we're going to have one person there per day all year, I think it's time now to terminate that agreement.
Okay. Well, I believe at this time that I would entertain a motion to that effect.
Okay, I move that we terminate the interlocal agreement with the city of Wapato, and that the mayor signs the letter.
Second that?
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda will be an ordinance here, and this is going to be a briefing, and Mr. Steve Goins, is our Economic Development Director, is going to present that to us.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Under consideration here is a draft ordinance. This is a update to the municipal code Title 21, which deals with our environmental regulations. We typically mirror our regulations with the State Environmental Policy Act. This is the state's regulations that are handed down to offer guidance for regulating environmental review of projects or non-project actions. We, from time to time, update our regulations so that we capture some updates and changes that might have occurred or things that are added or deleted over time. Typically, however, Jason and I were talking about this in our office, we refer to the state's website when we want to know what the regulations really are. We really don't even look at our own code because we typically rely on the state to be the most current edition of these codes. Well, we haven't done this in about 4 years, so this is really intended to be kind of a housekeeping matter to allow us to ensure that our regulations are consistent with the state guidelines. So the draft ordinance before you indicates in bold and underscored the portions that are added. The rest of the elements that you see there are currently in our code now. And our recommendation is to have a first reading of this ordinance and place on a consent for the study session for next week.
Any questions or comments from Mr. Goins?
So if I understand correctly, what it does is just places the state guidelines in our city code so that there's no chance of there being a discrepancy.
That's basically correct. We want to ensure that what we've adopted, there's no misunderstanding or inconsistency with what we may have and what the state's regulations say now. And that's the intent. We've found over time that the state has been moving toward trying to streamline regulations in some respects, and we want to capture those as well. There's been a lot of discussion about how some projects are still under that umbrella of requiring review that may seem pretty mundane, or typically there's a determination of non-significance issued as a result of the analysis. And all that paperwork and noticing and so forth is something that planners across the state have been trying to figure out a way to help all of us do a better job of getting public input, but at the same time not requiring a lot of analysis on a project that has no impacts.
All right. If that's all the questions that we have, it's staff's intention that we have a first reading of ordinance number 1844-02141 and place this on the consent agenda for February 10th, 2014 for a second reading and adoption. Leslie Ann, could we please have the first reading of that ordinance?
Ordinance number 1844-0214, first reading. An ordinance of the City of Shelton, Washington, amending Section 21.08.010 of the Shelton Municipal Code relating to SEPA guidelines.
All right. Next, under new business, is another briefing on another ordinance, and this will be presented to us again by our Economic Development Director, Steve Goins.
Thank you again, Mayor and Commissioners. Really have kind of two items to discuss tonight. We have issued the final environmental impact statement for the Shelton Hills development that was released on January 30th. That document has been dispersed to the community in different forms. A hard copy is available at the library or upstairs at the Community Development Department. We've placed it on the city website, as well as dispersing it by CD to a number of agencies and others that have had interest in the project. We've included in our noticing folks that have commented or been part of our previous scoping meetings or the meeting where we discussed the draft environmental impact statement. So we're in a period now where we're waiting to have a public hearing. One of our recommendations tonight will be to set that public hearing. And in essence, I wanted to just take a few moments and just underscore some of the things that are included in the key topics that are addressed in the final environmental impact statement. In summary, there was really three categories where these comments were directed toward. There was a lot of concern about the proximity of the development site to Goose Lake, which is the brownfield site owned by ITT Rainier, basically sandwiched between the airport and the Hall development site, and an area that's just south of the development and south of the C Street overpass, which is the former city landfill site. There's been a lot of concern over the contaminated nature of those sites and how that could potentially impact residents or where a school might be located on the proposed site. And the environmental document discusses how different arrangements or different mitigations are proposed to deal with those circumstances. In summary, staff and the consultants do agree that we need to do some measures to ensure the public's safe during this process. Absent having those projects, those cleanup sites closed and taken care of, we wanted to ensure that there was a way to keep the public off of them, so there's been mitigations added to require fencing and other types of things that would provide a barrier between potential residents or folks that are visiting the site and these brownfield sites until such a time as they're cleaned up and that activity's completed. There's been a number of comments generated about the Crickville Aqua recharge areas. These are areas that predominantly is that northwest part of the UGA. It's an expansive area that extends out of the UGA, in fact, that is part of the aquifer recharge for this region and the city in particular. The regulations that are in place now do require that any development would need to meet our regulations we have in place for development over a Crickville Aqua recharge area. The development will have some impacts. There will be a fair amount of pavement and grading activities that occur as part of the development. And the stormwater mitigations that are proposed are intended to mitigate for things like stormwater runoff and pretreatment and how that runoff is treated and how it percolates back into the ground and recharges the aquifer. Those items are addressed in the document. There was some concern over the location of the proposed school site. There was some narrative that described this in the draft. In summary, a portion of the hall site is outside of the zoning overlay for the airport. The zones for the airport have these different classifications based on where it is, if on the end of the runway or near the sides of the runway, and there's 6 zones. The largest zone is Zone 6, which is really the flight pattern around the landing area and the takeoff area. This area has very few limitations within it, but one of those is facilities like schools or hospitals are not supposed to be located in that zone. So the development was really sort of limited in where a school could be located. It had to be located outside of Zone 6, which was really just the south portion of the site, really the southeasterly portion of the development area. That's where the school is proposed. And again, the mitigations for potentially developing a school in that location are described in terms of either the landfill will be dealt with in some manner that meets ecology's approvals, or there'll be barriers, and so they keep kids out of that area, and there'll be testing to ensure that workers and others that are in that area are safe during the process of construction and as development would occur. Those are overarching sort of concerns, but they were many of the concerns that were raised. We had a comment from ecology about the location of the wetland mitigation site. We went back and through some coordination revisited that and came up with 2 alternatives, both which seemed to meet ecology's approval. Haven't seen that formally in writing, but through our conversations we believe that they are much more comfortable with the mitigation that we're proposing now than what was in the draft document. In summary, their concern was that our mitigation was in an area that's already functioning as a viable wetland buffer. They wanted us to move this area to a different location, and we found 2 locations that were mutually suitable, and the final document reflects that. The other item I wanted to convey tonight is, in form of this briefing, is our proposal is to adopt a planned action ordinance as part of the action for this. This was an initial action of many actions that will occur on this development over time. In summary, a planned action ordinance would establish that the environmental review that's been done is sufficient for development like that's been described. The commercial activity, the intensity of the residential activity, the type of stormwater enhancements that are necessary, the transportation elements that are part of the project, all of those different features have been looked at, and any future project or site-specific project that comes in and falls within the criteria that this is evaluated need no further environmental review. This is viewed by staff as a win-win for the community and for the city and for the developer, really. One of the advantages of the process we've taken on is we've tried to describe the project in a fair amount of detail so people can understand what exactly is being proposed. That was a little more costly in terms of time and how much effort it took to get there, but now we're able to specifically describe the project mitigations. So in the future, people aren't left to wonder what kind of mitigations might the city propose once development occurs. They're out there now. We already know what they are. The developer benefits because they can develop within what they have described here as their intended project and not have further delays for environmental review. So we feel there's a mutual benefit there for the community, for us, and for the developer. We're not asking for action tonight other than setting a public hearing. At the public hearing, we'll consider action on the ordinance for a planned action project and take public comment up until that time. I'll take any questions you might have.
Questions, comments?
Steve, on the on the school site there, it sounds like that's the only spot that could happen in.
With our current regulations, that's about right. There's just a triangular-shaped area of the project that's outside of Zone 6, and it's that most southerly portion there by C Street.
What kind of obligation is Hall under to locate that? Is that a requirement of this planned action, or if he decides to pull it off the plan, is there any other circumstances that can be accommodated anywhere else?
The process would allow revisiting that in the future, and if that was to be reconsidered, there'd be a number of pieces that would have to occur. First, we would have to modify our airport overlay zoning so that a school could be permitted within Zone 6, and that's certainly not something I can tell you that we would or wouldn't support, but that would be the first step. And then Hall would have to come in and request an alternative location, and we would evaluate that once that's occurred. I can also add that this is viewed as a mitigation for a fair number of students that will be added to the district over time. In addition to donating a school site, Hall's donating impact fees for each residence that would be developed.
The current schools are also in that same overlay, correct?
The high school and the junior high up by off of Wallace Nealon and Shelton Springs Road are within that zone. In fact, I think portions of the high school are in Zone 3, which is a more delicate site for that type of activity.
Right.
Questions or comments? I do appreciate the work that you put in on this project. How many years have you been talking about Shelton Hills?
7 years.
That's you personally, right?
That's right.
And this is one of the steps, the next step in a long, drawn-out process. And you have always, from my understanding, been in negotiations and communications with the Department of Ecology about every step of the way on this. And so it's a lot of work. And so thank you for that.
Sure.
Did you? Well, I was just kind of, because I have the document on my desk, and I've looked at it. I've looked at the pile on my desk, so I'm going to be digging into it and reading that in my spare time. But Commissioner Moore, did you have anything?
I did have something. I just thank you for the document. It is extensive, definitely, and I have read through it. A lot of it is redundant, so it isn't as frightening as it looks. But what I just want to say is that we're still going forth with efforts to get the 2 toxic waste sites cleaned up. And I know that's separate from what we're talking about right now, but because it is a concern, I just want to make sure and want the public to be sure that we haven't forgotten that. And that is, at least in my world, that is a priority to get those places cleaned up.
In terms of an update, we have been discussing with Ecology getting a assessment of the city landfill site. They have been working on a scope of work so that a consultant can be hired and brought on to do that initial evaluation. Once we have that, we'll know what the next steps are for us. Ecology's taking that first step on and the cost of that first step to do that initial analysis, and that helps them to evaluate just how the site ranks among other polluted sites in the state and helps them determine their parties of work as well. The Goose Lake site, we've been discussing this off and on for years, literally. We've been trying to move forward some planning activity around future reuse of the site, and that in part has been stalled because we're just not sure what kind of cleanup activity is going to occur. We're trying to, I guess, negotiate with Rainier and Ecology to move forward a plan, and that's stopped and started over time, and we're working behind the scenes to try to further that along. But in some respects, we're on the sideline here while a process is more or less out of our hands occurs. But we're doing our best to try to prod that along.
Yeah, I was going to say that is the one section I did read was the Goose Lake and the C Street dump. I did jump on that one, and I wanted to mention that too, that we are doing all we can do at this point, and working with Department of Ecology. And in the draft, there was some potential solutions mentioned that are being reviewed by the Department of Ecology. So, as Commissioner Moore said, it's important to me too that we address those environmental concerns. So that's the first section I got on to read.
Any more questions or comments?
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
All right, well, it appears that we are ready to move forward with this, and it's the staff's recommendation that the commission set a public hearing for February 18th for the final environmental impact statement and planned action ordinance to allow for the public review and comment on further consideration. So if the commission concurs, we'll set that public meeting for the meeting of Tuesday, due to President's Day holiday, February 18th, 2014. Next item of business is an administration report.
I don't always come up here, but we're having technical difficulties. All our cameras don't work. So one thing I had was just to let you know that Wednesday at 10 a.m. we'll have a webinar. We invited commissioners, so it also was a public meeting if anybody else wants to come. Pardon?
I did get an invite.
On your email?
I haven't read my email today.
Oh.
Okay, we can talk then. So, at any rate, so you're invited now. If two of you tell me that you're not interested, then, I guess that if anybody else wants to, they can sit in on it. But we won't have a public meeting, but we can. But there's
2 hour?
1 hour, hour or hour and a half.
I will be there. So I'm definitely interested, so I will be there.
Okay.
I'll write that note right down right now.
Okay, I'm going to stand by for when we do the touches, unless we're going to get comments, and then I'll come back up.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Leary. All right, this is the second opportunity for public comment. Pat, would you like to come up and speak at this time?
Do I sign in somewhere?
You've already signed in, and you can sign if you want there. Right here, just right there.
Patricia Vandehay, 111 Southeast Lupin Case, Shelton. I respectfully request that the mayor and the commissioners would consider having a meeting with some interested parties in regard to this last ordinance that you're discussing, the FEIS. We don't believe that all of these issues have been addressed adequately, either the C Street landfill or Goose Lake. And I think it would be to everybody's benefit. This is the thing. It's a lot to go through, and there's a lot of information in there. There's a lot of questions, too. And I think it would serve the public better if we could have some interaction with you and the planning department about questions that we have, and what they call solutions for some of these, such as digging up everything out of Goose Lake and piling it on top of the landfill, covering it up with a permeable surface and putting a fence around it and saying it's done. That landfill has never been closed. It's never had any water tests. There's all kinds of contaminants in it, as there is Goose Lake. And the suggestion of starting the progress of building or doing anything before that is taken care of is unacceptable. Or putting a sign up or a fence around it and saying, this is dangerous, don't go near it. I don't imagine that the State Department of Health would accept that as a good way of handling it. So I'm asking you, please, could we have some kind of interaction between you and the commissioners and the planning department, so we could bring to you what our real concerns are before we have this public hearing? Because it just seems to be ignored, whatever we give in the public hearing. And it's a very serious thing. And these environmental issues in Mason County are building up and up and up and up. And we're seeing part of the reaction or what's happening just with this gooey duck business with China. And it's all due to pollution. Pollution doesn't go away. Contamination doesn't go away. We keep adding to it. It just keeps adding to our problems health-wise, and it affects our economy too. So I'm asking you, is this possible? Could we have this kind of meeting between you and the planning department?
Well, I imagine that would be possible. I mean, I have heard from you, I think, several times about this, and I've talked to Mr. Goins about this myself, about how are we doing, Department of Ecology. I mean, when you have the Department of Ecology and SEPA, and no one has hidden anything. I mean, we are in negotiations, talking to them. What is the answer? In working through this process, I'll give you more time because I'm taking up your time. I guess I don't know what talking more at this point between us and you is going to do.
I think we'll be bringing out some points that you may be not even aware of.
Yeah. Well, that's my comments on it. I'm not positive that I would be able to change this.
Will any of the commissioners consider having a meeting with us?
I would. I would sit and listen.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. If you could, let us know when it would be convenient for you, we'll make the time.
Okay.
I would like to have some time to try and go through this because it's going to take a while, to read everything and make, notes and commentaries on it.
Yes,
Just a question for Steve. I'm sorry you can't see me on the camera, but I think you can hear me. Steve, is this a legislative or quasi-judicial activity that we're doing now? Okay.
Decision to move forward on the plan action orders would be the first decision following the adoption of the
So it's legislative?
That's correct.
Okay, then that's permissible.
Okay.
So let me just, this is just a possible idea, that if you wanted more time to bring more evidence before this group as us all together, then I would imagine it'd be at this city commission meeting, and what we would do is put you on the agenda, and then we would give more than the 3-minute time. We would give a little more, we donate 15 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes to the subject. I mean, I would imagine if you want to talk to us, here's where we are. And this is our meeting to air, public comments and things. So I would assume that if this is coming up for a public hearing on the 18th, next week's agenda would be the place where we place that. And that's, I think, would be the proper way you would do something like this, is to say, bring us your evidence, and we're here all together, and we're listening. And, I write things down all the time. And if there's something that we are unaware of that you feel we need to be more aware of, then I would imagine that we would have to put you on the schedule. We would schedule that at our next meeting, because we are, obviously this step is, and this also, remember, is a public hearing. This is that time when this normally would come out, but it seems like you want to bring more stuff before that.
I would like to have commissioners, though, also, if that's all right.
So the way that I understand it, for us to meet with you, if it's not a public meeting, we would have to schedule a time for Commissioner Olson to talk with you, and then a time for me to talk with you. That's correct, right?
Yeah,
No.
It's a public meeting, it's a quorum then, so.
Okay, I see. Well, that'd be fine, so
Okay.
if you let me know, I'd appreciate it.
But it sounds like it needs to be within the next week and a half or so.
Well, I'll spend this weekend going through it.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
very good. Thank you very
Pat.
much. Terry Thompson.
Hey, is it on? Is it on? Okay. Terry Thompson. Couple things is, I want to verify that I understand what is supposed to happen at a public hearing, because I'm not quite sure. I've been to public hearings before, but I've never seen anything that public said implemented in the outcome. So is there a way that that happens? I'm not being smarty, I'm curious, because, can you...
The process allows input. An example of this in the case of the project we're talking about is we had a scoping meeting at the beginning of the embarking on the environmental impact statement itself. And the purpose of that was to hear from the public as to what items that we thought we should evaluate as we put this together. And
But at this point, that it's way far along, I'm trying to figure out what we're going to say that will make a difference.
Well, that's more difficult to answer. I think that what we've tried to do is respond to all the comments we've received so far, and between the draft and the final document, the comments that we received when the draft was prepared are summarized in Chapter 3 of this final document.
Okay.
And you can find where those particular responses
I'm
lie.
hoping I'm not losing my time, so I'm freaking
So
out.
our objective was to try to respond to all those comments, and I think so far we have.
Okay. So I haven't had time, because obviously we just got this thing like Friday night. It's the first time I even took a look at it. And I'm going to say I was so angry by the time the night was over because of things about vagueness. And I brought that up when I originally wrote. And it's the whole idea about saying issues of, I wrote down a couple words here, it is anticipated. When we're talking about environmental health, you can't just like anticipate when we're talking about these big things that can have real health consequences. And I wanted to say I was on the phone with the toxic model cleanup part of Ecology Today. I've met with them multiple times over at Ecology. And a lot of what it is, your belief under reading this is not so. Steve has talked to them multiple times, I know that, and I'm not saying he didn't. What I'm saying is, the political pressure that we put on right after I spoke here, it worked, and they met with us, and they were going to do something. What happened, and since Steve said, we want this to happen too, it has gone to sleep. Like it went to sleep for like 20 years. And at this point, they're working now on a place in downtown Tacoma. And we met with them at the time that he said that they were looking into reviewing, they were in process of hiring people. He gave us a whole scenario of what exactly they were testing for. We went through the whole gamut, and it was supposed to be done by the 1st of December. And there was no notification, so we called and I asked, and then she told me that basically it's kind of been put at the sideline anymore, and Chris Matthews had told us the only way that this is going to happen is political pressure. So I'm saying to each one of you, because I talked to them today about this, if you want this to happen, not only do the public need to put forth effort to say, we want an assessment and a cleanup if needed, because this is what they said about assessment. I said, how does it rank? If let's say 1 is the worst and 5 is the least worst when they assess. Who gets the cleanup? They said, well, that's the odd thing. It has nothing to do at all with how the number it is assessed at. It could be the worst-case scenario and still not be cleaned up, yet the 5 could be cleaned up. And it's because who has political pressure? So I'm not real good about that. I don't understand that. I can get people writing letters, I guess, and that's about the only thing. So I'm asking, you have more political pressure than probably I have. So if you want, and then also, Steve, you brought up closure in here, and I just want to bring that up too, that we do need this thing closed, but part of the closure requirement is things like water assessment. They have to be monitoring the water. It has to have closure funds, which I'm not so sure that it even has at this point. There's some indiscrepant things, and maybe I should be bringing that up at the hearing, that with statements in here that I'm like very much in arguing, because I did the research on this stuff, that I do not believe that's so, and I had the conversation today to verify that I was not misunderstanding. So I feel like there are some things in here that are not quite like what they seem. And I think with the things that we're talking about, we need to be really sure. And I really recommend that if we're going to be able to have a public meeting next week, that I'm going to try my hardest to see if I can get Lori Morgan and John Storman to come in here. Lori Morgan wrote the book for the critical aquifer recharge area that the state goes by, knows a lot about it, can look and make statements about our whole CARA area and the maps that we do have, and give their personal opinion instead of it seems like, or we can assume that, those kind of things, so that we've been in a process with the county now for almost a year, because there is a lot of discrepancy with their CARA regulations, and I know that the law requires that because you two kind of like abut the city and the county, that you guys all need to follow each other's rules and regulations.
We are, you're about 5 minutes, so
Okay.
you probably have to, thank you, appreciate it. All right, next, any final touches there? No touches. Steve, Ms. Goins,
I do have a touch.
okay?
Do I need to go up there to, can I say it from here? There's a house that's located on 2nd Street, I think it's 218 South 2nd Street, that the Historic Preservation Board has recommended be added to the Historic Register. Eric Burke will be bringing a presentation on that next week at the study session.
All right? Very good, okay. Our next meeting will be February 10th at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. This meeting is adjourned.